What's it like to be out here a year and a half later, pretty much, and having people together, having some semblance of normalcy compared to the madness that we've seen over the last little while?
Well, it's there's some normalcy in it, but we can't kid ourselves. There's still restrictions and mandates out there in the country, and whether it be Alberta or Canada, and people got to wake up and pay attention to what's going on still.
You know, Adam Sos here for Rebel News, and we're on location at this great Bibles and Bulls event. It's a rodeo of sorts being put on by Full Steam Ahead Productions, which is run by Ty Northcott. He got in some COVID-19 heat for hosting rodeos when they weren't permitted. It's being hosted here at the grounds of the Whistle Stop Cafe, another COVID-19 resistor location where owner Chris Scott refused to shutter the doors of the Whistle Stop Cafe. It's shocking just a year and a half later, after all the chaos, after RCMP descended on this location, that folks are back out here again enjoying a little bit of freedom. So we're going to enjoy some of the scenery, check out some bull riding, and talk to some folks about how it feels to be free in the West. So a man who needs no introduction, rodeo royalty, Ty Northcott. I guess first off, for folks out there who maybe don't know, how are the sort of charges from the Freedom Rodeo? Is there any sort of development on that, or is that still just up in the air?
They've pushed our court date back again. We're supposed to come up in October. Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of other charges dropped, a lot of Court of Appeals victory. Are you hoping they might back off on some of that?
I'd prefer to go to court and get some information out of our government why all this happened.
It's a bold position, certainly.
Nice. All right.
What's it like to be out here a year and a half later, pretty much, and having people together, having some semblance of normalcy compared to the madness that we've seen over the last little while?
Well, it's there's some normalcy in it, but we can't kid ourselves. There's still restrictions and mandates out there in the country, and whether it be Alberta or Canada, and people got to wake up and pay attention to what's going on still.
It's a different atmosphere for sure. Last year when we were doing this kind of stuff, we had to always look over our shoulder, didn't know who was going to get arrested, even making gates so that people, we had to filter through. Now it's free. We don't have to, cops aren't even floating around. So it's a little more calmer atmosphere. The vibe is a lot more fun. We're not here for negative reasons either, like trying to fight the government and their overreach.
Well, the reality of it is we're social animals. We need to get out and visit people. They tried locking us up for 2 years. I didn't pay attention to much of that. I called BS on it. So people just got to get out to live their lives and disregard a bunch of that, let's say, crap.
And what do you think about the fact that it was sort of the cowboys, the truckers, the hardworking folks that kind of very much led the resistance right across this country?
Grassroots people. I mean, that's what it goes back to. They were all awake. A lot of them were awake, and they'll lead our country if we let them lead our country. Put us back to where we need to be.
Jason Kenny. Rachel Notley.
I'm joined by Catherine Kolchuk, leadership hopeful for the Independence Party of Alberta. Just kind of taking a look back, last time I was here, RCMP were swarming in. We're in a state of absolute disarray. A lot of that being brought down and pushed by Justin Trudeau on a federal level. Years later, the court's starting to get some things right, but very much they did cave to that provincial and that federal sort of influence and pressure. What's your sort of hope and ambition? Let's say you do win the leadership.
Well, first of all, we need to look at all the legislation, like the Public Health Act, for instance, and we need to repeal it, or the portions of the Public Health Act that allowed and that bestowed all that power onto the medical examiner, the chief medical officer, Dina Henshaw. But the other things that we need to do is we need to really look at the bureaucracy as well, because I think what COVID has unveiled for us is that the bureaucracy has way too much power. And so a lot of the bureaucracy needs to be fired, quite honestly and bluntly. And so those things, as well as an inquiry into COVID, that will result in accountability actually occurring, not just a report done to be filed into a desk that doesn't ever get seen, or people will be held accountable. And that includes the bureaucracy and the elected officials that allowed this medical tyranny to ensue for as long as it has.
So I'm joined by Chris Scott, owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe here. I guess first off, probably a year and a half ago, we were out here trying to do a basic event, and there's eyes to the skies looking for helicopters. RCMP showed up. How different is it to be here now and just having some semblance of normalcy at least?
Well, it's not really much different. I mean, we got lots of people here. There's some bullshit. It is what it is, right?
Now, you secured a pretty significant victory, not like absolute, but a pretty resounding victory for you on the majority of that. Is there anything sort of left on the horizon, or are you on the cusp of through the legal trouble?
Oh, not even close. Like, so what you're referring to the appeal victory with Archer Pulowski and myself. So, as you're well aware, Archer was 100% successful. They threw out everything. He never should have been charged with that, and yet maybe we should take a minute.
Yeah.
East Country Electric.
Well, that was quick.
Yeah,
So far,
These are some good bulls.
they are, yeah.
the Bulls are winning.
Wow. So Archer stuff is all gone. AHS had to pay him back. And with my matter, I wasn't so fortunate. So my charges weren't dropped, but the appeal court judges decided that they're going to drop my fines from $30,000 to $20,000. So I have less fines to pay. They also ended my probation and community service. So all I have left is the $20,000 in fines, of which I paid, I think, $6,000 or $7,000 or something. So that was just the small fish in this legal ocean we're in. Next week, I'm in court again on 22 charges of contravening the Public Health Act. Nothing's been dropped. Nothing's been won. I haven't even had a day in court, and I have no idea how that's going to go. But, in the meantime, we're just going to do what we do and have fun and try and do some community-involved events like this and, just do what Albertans do.
Keep on trucking.
Yeah.
Keep on trucking. Well, thanks for putting all this on. I know folks are having a great time here. We'll certainly touch base with your lawyer, who's provided through fightingfines.com, Chad Williamson, hoping for the best success, and hopefully the courts, they've seemingly had some common sense on some other decisions. Hopefully we see some of these charges dropped. Do you think that's a possibility?
I don't know. Most of my friends with similar charges, their stuff's been dropped. As a matter of fact, Deb with Tipsy Cow is here today. Her charges were dropped, but I've got court next week and mine haven't been. So in a way, I'm a little nervous because it's not fun, right? But I'm also kind of happy they haven't been charged because I think maybe it's important that somebody actually gets into court and faces their accusers and makes a case as to why what was done to us was wrong and why I was justified in doing what I did. So either way, things are going to work out the way they're supposed to, and I'm good with that.
Freedom and prosperity through independence shoot. The Alberta Prosperity Project is where Chris Young is. That's it, Chris.
So I'm now joined by Tanner Naday, the Vice President of Economics for the Alberta Prosperity Project. I just kind of wanted to get the sort of motivation behind you guys being here sponsoring this event, what sort of rodeo and grassroots culture has meant for Alberta and for the APP.
Oh, the rodeo culture in Alberta is Alberta. Like when I think of Alberta itself, cows, rodeo, rancher, farmer, that's the emblem and the anthem of Alberta. And so we've had such tremendous support from these farmers who want the same thing we do, which is freedom and prosperity and a protection of our rights. They see what's happening in the federal government. They see what's happening all over the world. And they, like all those other brave individuals in the Netherlands and across the world, want to protect what's rightfully theirs. And so we're working for freedom and prosperity through independence, as you know. And so sponsoring events like these are just another way to meet all of these members of the community, the farming community, or anyone for that matter, who wants to take a look at what we're working with or working for and see if they want to get involved. So it's been a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed ourselves.
And now, if you don't mind, I just thought I'd sort of pick your brain. How do you find it, or why do you think it is that the truckers, the cowboys, the farmers, the ranchers, the working class people, the family people. Those are the folks who have sort of stood up and said no, one, to COVID-19 sort of overreach, but two, to Ottawa's intrusion into Alberta.
Oh, I'd say because they're not involved with government. Ranchers, farmers, truckers, etc., the working class of Alberta, and to be entirely honest, all of Canada for that matter, they're not so closely involved with government. And so it's not in their interest, quite rightly, to see government expand to this massive hydra that it is now. And they also see the restrictions and the troubles that are coming upon them as a consequence of higher government. It's harder to see that in Edmonton, or it's harder to see that in the big cities, no matter where you are in Canada, just because the demographic is different. But when you operate a ranch, for example, and you realize that there are only 3 massive packing plants in all of Canada that beef goes to slaughter, you realize that if even one of those packing plants is taken offline for whatever reason, there is a massive discrepancy, a real shortage that you'd have to try and navigate. And so they see what's coming, they see it clearly, and as such, I think they're supporting our cause and our movement.
Right between. And after.
So I'm now joined by Dr. Daniel Nagase. It's incredible the people you see out here in the middle of nowhere in Alberta for a rodeo. Yeah. As a sort of medical doctor and one of the early critics of the COVID-19 response, how incredible is it to see that so much of what you were saying we were broadcasting has been basically adopted by the mainstream? People were vilified, marginalized, and now they're like, oh, turns out they were right. Is that kind of what you've been witnessing?
That's what I have been seeing. I actually have seen it a lot in politics. Back in the 1990s, in American politics, there was something called the pivot shift. So politicians who were doing something unpopular would pivot to a popular point of view. And then once people gained trust because the politician was saying the right things, then the politician would try to shift the public opinion back to whatever their original stance was. So again, back in November, December, I was talking a lot about all the things that were going wrong, the mandates, the masks, the vaccines. And now that it's coming true and media is starting to pay attention, and Rebel News was one of the first to get onto this, we're seeing politician candidates like Danielle Smith, who's running for the UCP leadership. She's already done the pivot. Right? She pivoted towards the independence agenda, where you want to take Alberta independent of the federal government, and Albertans are no longer subject to Justin Trudeau's vaccine mandates or vaccine lockdown policies. And in Grand Prairie, she was shifting the crowd in Grand Prairie by talking about how net zero, the UN policies about climate, carbon taxation, and net zero would be beneficial to Alberta.
I am now probably the first and early adopter of thinking that we can hit a net zero target and we can get there faster than anywhere else.
So do you suspect that lots of these people who are shifting and maybe even saying, oh, we should have never done this, should have never locked up passes, should have never had mandates, they're going to try and shift back towards that in the coming months, coming years?
That's right. This is a 30-year-old political technique. Whatever the agenda is, the politician is the salesperson, right? And then so if the politician is getting resistance because people are onto the game, then the politician has to regain the people's trusts. And so how they do that is they pivot towards whatever point of view the public has, with the long-term goal that they're gradually going to shift back to their own agenda. And that's a sad thing to say.
Yeah. Well, that is a wrap from the Bibles and Bulls event here in Mirror, Alberta. It was great to catch up with some folks and look back at maybe a year or two ago when this wouldn't have been possible, or at least it would have only occurred under quite a bit of scrutiny and RCMP attention. Great to have some folks out here today enjoying some bulls, enjoying some barbecue, and enjoying people's company. As always, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Sos. You know, elected officials and unelected health officials alike put Albertans through so much over the past 2 years. Dina Hinshaw, the Chief Medical Officer of Health here in Alberta, was one of the worst offenders, and you probably agree with me and think it's bull that she got a near $250,000 bonus. So if you think Dina Hinshaw needs to be held accountable and give that money back, go to payitback.ca.